Good morning.
Hey.
Hello, hello.
Hey. It's Peter here.
GM.
Hey, Annika.
Hi.
Hey, guys. Hey, Annika.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
How's everyone?
Surviving.
Very good.
Yeah.
So I think, there's Daniel, and I think Priska is missing.
And Aaron's going to come join us about 5 to 10 minutes late.
Okay, great. Daniel, I just invited you. Please accept. Oh, there's Priska. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
There's Priska. Hi, good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good evening. Nice to be here.
All right, I think we got everybody that's going to be here right out of the gate.
Shall we kick it off?
Okay, so I do it, right?
Go for it.
So thank you for joining us tonight. Our topic tonight is pre and post NFT photography. I don't know. We just came up with the term post NFT photography. Let's see what all of you say to this. So we have some of the most important voices in photography on stage with us tonight and would like to discuss the following questions with them and of course you. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. We'll bring you up. What is NFT photography? How has the medium and its perception evolved? How did artists sell their photographs before NFTs? That's why we have Priska and Peter Ugo with us. How do photographers build up a community on Twitter? Daniel can help us with that question. And what are the best platforms for NFT photography? We'd be happy to discuss that with you. And who do we have with us? Hi Justin, good evening. Justin is the co-founder and CEO of Quantum Art. It's one of the leading NFT platforms for photography. In February, that's just a few weeks ago, Quantum Art announced the raise of 7.5 million in a Series A funding round. And before Quantum, I'm pretty sure all of you know that, Justin launched Twin Flames, a photographic collection of 100 sets of twins. And among his collectors are Snoop Dogg, Gary Vee, and G-Money. And in October, Christie sold one of his photos from the Twin Flame series for 1.1 million. And I think, Justin sort of like started I used the word hype. No, I'm sorry for that, around NFT photography. Then we have Priska Paska with us, a German gallerist. She opened her gallery in Cologne in 2000 with a strong focus on photography. and she worked with some of the most renowned photographers like Lesitsky and Ulrike Rosenbach. And she's one of the few galleries in Germany working with NFTs today. She also has a virtual gallery and works a lot with digital artists, and is after many years back to working with photography. Then we have with us from New York and also based in a browser, Damiansky. He explores the concept of apps as artworks, and we invited him because I think that's 2 weeks ago he published his first DApp titled Unhuman Compositions. It's a collection of 777 participatory generative photography NFTs. Damiansky coined the term PGP. We all know the term or the three letters PFP. So he'll tell us all about his participatory generative photography project. People are invited to take a photo with the camera of their smartphone, and then an algorithm keeps working with the photos. Who else do we have? We're very honored to have Peter Hugo with us tonight. Hi, Peter. He was born in Johannesburg in South Africa, and he has gained a reputation for his documentary photography and his striking fashion images. Choosing to focus on marginalized or unusual groups of people, he has published many books and has been exhibited worldwide. And to just mention a few museum collections where his work is in, it's the MoMA, Centre Pompidou, and Rijksmuseum. And he's regularly published in titles such as the German Zeit magazine, French Le Monde, and the New York Times magazine. Then, we have Daniel Gebhardt with us, an Austrian photographer based in Berlin. I guess most of you have seen his photos of jumping cats, alpacas in New York, or dogs wearing fashion. It's Nice that called him the art world's Dr. Dolittle. And in January of this year, he started selling his photographs on Foundation and Super Rare, and he's here to help us understand how to best get started in the NFT space. And I think Jesse and Nicole, one of you could take over from here. That is not only me speaking all the time.
I can jump in. So also moving down the list, we have Mizan Harriman is a photographer, entrepreneur, social activist, and chairman of the South Bank Centre in London. He's the first person of color in 104 years of British Vogue to shoot the cover in September 2021. Through photos, he documents key moments in history, such as Black Lives Matter and other civil rights moments. Mizan has released some of his photography work on OpenSea, as well as a collaboration with artist Defaced. Mizan is passionate about exploring how Web3 can help democratize merit-based opportunities for artists globally. And then we have Elise Swopes, to my immediate right, is a self-taught photographer and educator. She is regarded as one of the original iPhone artists, combining smartphone photography and digital techniques to create magical realist art. She has partnered with companies including Adobe, Adidas, and Apple as one of the top-selling artists on Super Rare. And then Aaron Huey is not quite. Oh no, Aaron has just joined. Let me invite him up. Aaron Huey is an American photographer, explorer, activist, and storyteller. He is a National Geographic photographer and explorer, Stanford D School fellow, and founder and chief creative of Amplifier.org. His stories from all over the world on subjects as diverse as the Afghan drug war and the underwater photography of sharks can be found in the New Yorker, New York Times, and more. He's currently on assignment for Nat Geo exploring photography in the metaverse. And he has just now joined us. So Nicole, now I will hand over to you.
Cool. Yeah, I can kick it off maybe with the first question for our speakers. And yeah, so thinking about how social media maybe has like changed the way we perceive photography as a medium, and has it devalued the role of photography as an art form? And I'll open it up to anybody who wants to take this.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. How's it going, everybody? Thank you for hosting this amazing room with all these incredible photographers and photography enthusiasts. I think when you think about Web 2, everyone was so it was so natural for everyone to just share their work so people could see it. And I didn't think, now that we have the hindsight of Web3 and NFTs and people valuing our photographs, I think back when it was Web2 in our Instagram days, when we're posting, we're commenting, we're sharing things in our portfolio, we're curating our blocks on Instagram to make it look cohesive. I think, when you were a photographer and you would show galleries or agencies your work, they'd check your Instagrams, how many followers you had, whatever. And with that comes a lot of other things that happen, like such as when we're out in the world trying to be artists, people use those numerical values that are pretty much social value, and it's not so much the merit of the works. So when you're looking at Web 2, you're seeing people scroll endlessly and like an image and then move on for them to never see that image again. And it disproportionates the value of the work that these artists are putting in years, 5 years, a lot of time, similar to how people make paintings. And so the scrollability in my eyes is what I think ultimately devalued everyone's work, because people are over consuming it in a fast way where they can't see the value because they don't spend enough time. And I think time and maturity is what actually gives value to these things. So when we're seeing NFTs, people are stopping, people are evaluating, people are learning more. And I think it makes the viewer stop and care more, which ultimately makes people value not only their time, but the things that they're looking at more precise.
Yeah, if I could jump in as well. I mean, I completely agree with that, Justin. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, coming from an Instagram background myself, I was one of the first people on Instagram. I made a brand for myself. I leveraged it for a lot of my projects over the last decade. And I have seen the shift. When I first started, we were just trying to express ourselves. It was out of desperation because we had nothing left. At least I did. I was a college dropout with nothing but an iPhone 4, and I just wanted to build. I wanted to share. I wanted to meet people. But then it started into the commodity. Things started shifting quite a bit where everyone was pushing out so much, and even myself, I started doing daily posts of my own art, and that just made me sick, physically and mentally, spiritually. And if I can bring anything into this space, it's this understanding and the shift of what we really have to do with pacing ourselves, with slowing down to the speed of life, because this is not what we're supposed to necessarily be at a consistent rate. So yeah, we really have to value that process of time, like you said, and to slow down and to really to be present more than anything.
And the fact that what you just said, so much content being pushed out there, kind of like forcing just so we're a relevant brand. And I think the antithesis of what we're seeing in Web3 is more scarcity mindset. So the least you put out, the more valuable it is. And it's ironic how it totally got flipped. And we're not chasing that algorithm anymore to be our top post or have over 10 likes.
Yeah, hi guys, Peter here. So this is a world that's completely alien to me, and it's fantastic. This is my first time being in a Twitter group. One of the most amazing things to me about art is the fact that it slows down or changes the rhythm of looking or consuming images, or the world in general. And anyway, 2 cents.
Mizan?
Yeah. Hey everyone. It's interesting because if we zoom out, the cardinal sin of imagery is that it was the mother of social media is imagery. There wouldn't be no social media today if it wasn't for the JPEG. The kingdom of Zuckerberg. From Friendster even, or I don't know how many of you remember High Five, and of course MySpace. These were the pipes, the fuel within those pipes was the JPEG before the internet even had the bandwidth to put videos. And unfortunately, the people that were behind these unicorn social media platforms never, I wouldn't say they had any respect for imagery, but they had other things on their mind. They were building billion-dollar businesses, and the image itself was used to change the way mankind functions. And I'm not over exaggerating. The image was used to change how we exist today, and it was commoditized so much that the great Magnum S photojournalists that many of us would have read about or studied became unneeded because their kind of work wasn't fast enough, wasn't remotely profitable for the BuzzFeed or the Daily Mail, and for many of the people that are listening or that are speaking in this space, our livelihoods were almost impossible to, unless you were very, 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 very lucky to sustain oneself. And the great leveling of smart contract technology is the reclaiming, I think, what imagery was pre social media in the Web 2 form. So it's just a really interesting thing. But just taking that bird's eye view, honestly, social media was built on the picture, for better or worse. And when the algorithms came in, what I describe as the weaponization of mediocrity happened. And I'm just so glad that we're all here speaking about how we can reclaim the value of the still image with Web3 technology.
Misan, I'm so glad you brought that up because I feel like, photography, if you look at the early Christie's and Sotheby's results, you see Cindy Sherman, you see Andreas Gursky, all these photographers selling around like $3 to $4 million. And it all happened between 1990 and 2000. And then something happened after 2000 where people stopped caring about photography and something, it was devaluing. And you look back now, I feel like there's a whole new shift in the way people perceive photography. And all of us here leading the way on this panel will pretty much, I think, drive more value back to photography that we didn't see in the past 22 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think the internet happened, by the way. I just wanted to say, I think the internet happened, by the way. That's what the shift was.
Yeah, and that means as well that the photography was not an object anymore. It was just an image. And when you think back to 1920s and 30s and you see all the quality of this great photography that has been done at that time and all the great tonality and the black and white works that were existing, and then after 2011 it was really just an image, and we saw it all on these little screens and we were sharing it, and the quality of the print itself as an object was not visible anymore. Exactly. And then the other thing is as well, what I think is very interesting, and that is the manipulation through images. So this existed already as well in the Russian time when they were changing and manipulating in the 30s and 40s the images. So this power of images was always very important, and when we have for today all these things that are surrounding us, And I remember that in 2011, I was working with one artist, and he was a photographer, or he started as a photographer, and then he said it's not useful anymore to produce more photographs in these times when everybody has them on Tumblr and Instagram. It's more the question to question what these photographs do with you. So what is the power of these images that are surrounding? And this is the same what you're saying about this weaponization of photography, right?
I mean, speaking of power and value, which you've just mentioned, Justin, I mean, is this value connected to money? I mean, on social media, everyone shared, like you've just mentioned, their images for free, and now there's like monetary value connected to it. People seem to perceive it differently. Maybe Daniel, that's a good question for you because you had these viral animal images. I mean, your PFP is one of your dog photos, and in January you started selling them on Foundation, and finally got money for all the likes and the visibility.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing with money is really good and bad in the same way because I before when I was in Web 2, it was already exciting to get a few likes for images and a few followers, and it was okay. But when I started with NFTs and also got money in the beginning of the year, it was like a completely another kind of a drug, and it really makes you super addicted and crazy. And I think I also had to stop for a few weeks because it was just too intense for me. And now I have to find slowly back into it. But it still feels new and super exciting. And yeah, money changes a lot with this, but yeah, I'm not sure what's better. I mean, both is kind of addictive, and yeah. But what was the question about the? Sorry, I lost the question. I just.
No, I was just wondering if the new, I mean, yeah, Justin started the hype around NFT photography, which sort of like was connected also to an auction at Christie's, and suddenly there was this huge monetary value connected to photography, which wasn't there before. So, do you think people are suddenly really interested in photography again because people can now collect them? I mean, that would also be interesting to maybe hear from Priska and Peter about, or Justin has just raised his hand. I mean, what has changed through NFTs and like really the before NFTs, which Priska and Peter know about, and especially Justin knows about, and Daniel the after, and Misan and Elise for sure as well. Sorry.
And Darren.
Yeah, maybe I take this from before. So before NFT, there was it was a kind of very specialized group around the world that was interested in collecting photography. And for example, so the majority of people that were collecting as private collectors were in the United States, and maybe some in England and some in France, but that was not was really a really small group of people. And I, for example, have sold mainly to museums all over the years. And I think that now this is a little bit changing. That is opening up. Or Peter, what do you think?
I think that photography has always had a super close relationship with technology, and the modes of disseminating imagery and presenting it, I don't know, it seems kind of dated at the moment, and yeah, it needs to move on. And I'm curious. Yeah, it's my 2 cents.
I think what we're seeing here with NFTs is what we've always wanted to see with photos, because if you look at the history of photography, everything has always been so reproducible. And I think that reproducibility has always stunted photography's growth. I mean, if you look at a Basquiat selling for $200 million, you look into why. You look at the provenance, you look at the people collecting it and trading it, you look at the the fact that there's only one. And I think with NFTs coming along, I think now that there's a scarcity model where there's mostly one of one photographs, and some of these are iconic cultural images like Massan's work, then I think we start to reevaluate what's important, why scarcity is important for photography, and how that affects the value. And going back to what we were talking about with the Christie's thing, it's more so about the power to the creator versus monetary value. And I do think because crypto has an absurd amount of money in it, the traditional art world looks at it as a guide for finances because they've always been interested in tech and crypto but can never infiltrate it. And I think them seeing work sell for that amount of money in a way validates it in the art history and brings interest in a way that it hasn't happened before. And I think that's why we're on this panel, connecting the art world with crypto. And I think that's always been the conversation, is where do these two meet in the middle and how do they work together to create abundance for everyone involved?
We're also kind of in thinking about the economics and the value related to photography. There's a sort of another category that Aaron and Misan, I think, in particular can speak to, which is the magazine world and the sort of places where anything from photojournalism to fashion photography, there is a market for, but it's a very specific one. So it'd be really great to hear from both of you about what the maybe situation traditionally has been and what it feels like it's turning into as we look into a, quote, post NFT landscape.
I can try that.
Please go.
Well, I came out of the magazine world, and I'm one of the lucky ones that managed to do really well with Instagram and made a living with that, being one of the first dozen building the Nat Geo Instagram feed that's now at, I don't even know, like 220 million people. But the energy for that is gone. It doesn't work anymore. Even though I have access to feed it, I just don't have the spirit to do it anymore. I don't care about that specific outlet. And a lot of the photography I did for the magazines has changed shape and has a shape that doesn't fit those magazines anymore. Work like photogrammetry or the work that I'm doing now, all in-world photography in metaverse spaces. It's not really made for those audiences. And when I show it in my Instagram, the audience is scared of a lot of this experimental work. They want predictability. And so I see in this new space a place to try a lot of new experiments and really express myself the way that I know that I can, that isn't really made for that older space.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And I'm going to just be, two things. Firstly, touching on what Justin was finishing on, this is the only medium in smart contract technology in NFTs that is easy for everyone from every culture. It doesn't matter what god you worship, what language you speak to get. Everyone knows what an image is, and that is the billion, potentially $1 trillion opportunity in the rebirth of the value proposition in photography. As much as I love my precious written and spoken word and contemporary art and 3D rendering and gaming, not everyone immediately gets that. Whereas an image is an image, and I believe that's why when NFTs become the household technology that they will, the still image is going to be in a unique position across all the mediums. I strongly believe that. But going on to the magazine world, I'm just going to be real with y'all. Listen, my Vogue cover, which changed my life. I don't know what I got paid for that. $500. It's not. You don't make any money, even for the huge things. And that's maybe the return of it was the amount of recognition I got from outside of the magazine system. But big commissions rarely exist anymore, and to function comfortably as a photographer, you need to be the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that gets large brand deals, whether it's from an advertising agency or a myriad of things, a big film, TV, or music campaign, and then you can have a decent living. But what happened to me when I suddenly was shoved into the spotlight and had every gallery speaking to me? I was having conversations, and I just want to be very honest here, with men and women, many that had never taken a picture before, that suddenly from one day to the next were telling me that I was great. They were telling me that, they wanted to represent me and have me in Paris and New York and London. And maybe because I'm a little bit older, when everything happened with me, I didn't like that, because I thought of everyone that has at least the same ability as I do, that lost the lottery of life by birth. Those that held the camera and had the same vision, if not more than me, from so many parts of my beloved continent, Africa, and country, Nigeria. What if someone in Caracas has, is an ex-Norman Parkinson or Cecil Beaton, but they have no access to these museum and gallery owners that really decide you have to kiss their ring, if you like, and suddenly your work matters. And although there are issues in Web3, I can say myself, I have seen photographers from all corners of the globe be able to have their work celebrated and recognized in a way that it would be literally impossible to do in Web 2. And I think the magazine world is going to have to really think about how they can have a value proposition for really talented image makers. Because now, if you want to go and do extraordinary things with your lens, there are DAOs that will commission you. And you can have your work seen on your own, manifold or smart contract enabled website. I mean, this is a revolutionary moment for image makers, but also for the democratization of merit based opportunities. If I think of the Turkish photographers I'm coming across that I had never heard of, some of the most amazing talent I've seen anywhere, and I'm a judge of some pretty big photography competitions, how would I have come across them? Many of them are finally knowing that they don't have to put that camera away, knowing that their calling actually is something that can sustain them. So that's my general viewpoint of how big a deal this is.
Priska, would you like to add something as a gallerist? Amita, maybe Peter, who's represented by one working with galleries?
Yeah, everything is changing, huh? That's for sure. And yeah, I like very much as well this appreciation of photography in this NFT space very much. And of course, we as galleries, we are gatekeepers, but there's only this certain amount of collectors around. And for example, I started in 99 to do Paris Photo for the first time. And Paris Photo was so important, and it was really such a great place to be and to connect with photographers and with collectors. But over the years, so after 2010, after 2011, it was never the same place as before. And so therefore, I think that this is really a great opportunity. And the other thing as well is that I have the impression that at the moment there are a lot of new talents arriving. So because I was in the last 5 years, I was a little bit less concerned about photography and doing other things like painting, installation, and video art, and because I just couldn't find photographers that I was so fascinated by as I am, for example, with Peter. And I think now in this new space, it's really fantastic to discuss every day new people that I never heard about.
I
Maybe
also
on
think you
this.
raised a good point. Oh, sorry about that.
No, go for it, Justin.
I was just gonna say, I think you raised a good point about the limited collectorship. And I think we have a opportunity now here with NFTs and NFT collectors and crypto enthusiasts to share and show the love of photography that we've had all these years and the education and knowledge that you would otherwise have to either go to galleries, museums, or school for. I think now we have the time to share all that through social media. So Web 2 isn't a bad thing if we use it for Web 3 purposes, like we're doing now with Twitter. And I think all it takes to get new collectors is to inspire them and educate them. And, we're doing it right now.
I mean,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm seeing, and therefore I'm so. I think it's really a great opportunity, and it's fantastic to see as well these growing communities at the moment.
What's the best way to get started as a photographer who hasn't sold NFTs yet? I mean, Daniel, you arrived in January, and then you like really managed to sell quite a few NFTs quickly. What are your recommendations? Also, Justin, or all of you. How did you get started? I mean, how do you build up a community? What's the best ways to do it?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that it's really a little bit confusing for me to hear and realize what you guys are saying, especially the people in the US. I think you're always a step ahead of us in Europe. And when you say kind of telling that the magazine world is dying and getting assignments by DAOs and Web3, so it's really super exciting time, and it changes really a lot. And for me to start the, selling NFTs, I mean, I'm not as long in the space as you maybe, but first it was strange that I had a lot of bigger followers in Instagram, and I built it up for a very long time, and I was thinking that I have a strong audience which I could easily connect to NFT. But when I told when I made postings in stories in Instagram, almost nobody knew anything about what I'm talking about. And I told them to follow me on Twitter, and I had 3 new followers afterwards. So it was kind of strange that I had to start from the very beginning again, and I had to build up a completely new audience with everything and learn everything, relearn everything, because this really feels felt strange because like the Jumping Cats or other projects I did before, they have been super successful in Web 2, and CNN and all the big media were writing about, but nobody knew about it in Twitter and in the new NFT space. And so it was exciting to start again and start with a very low floor price and slowly building up and trying just by try and error. And I think maybe I also have done it too fast. And I guess the next step will be to produce something which is made especially for Web3, which I never did so far, because now I mostly used the work I have done before. But I think the next step, like you said, will be to work more in Web3 and do things especially only for selling them. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I feel like myself, like I'm starting over from scratch. I feel like my, 800,000 followers doesn't really like not even 0.5% translates over, maybe less. I feel like it is a complete start over, and it's actually quite intimidating for me, to be honest. I'm at the very beginning of this journey still.
I mean, what are your
Yeah.
plans? How are you doing it? I mean, are there strategies? A lot of young photographers are listening, and I assume a lot of you also. I guess Peter is going to get started on Super Rare soon, so he might be also very thankful for some tips.
I am trying, as I just heard, to make a body of work that's made in and of the space itself, and not trying to like dredge up old JPEGs. Because I don't want to do that. I want to make something that's really specific to this time, and so the first work I'll release is all work made via avatars in a dozen different metaverse worlds. and it's a perfect way, I think, to start over if I'm starting with a new audience, because the Instagram audience doesn't want that work.
Right. I completely agree with what Peter was saying actually about trial and error. I mean, I personally have been around for quite a bit, and people in this space can think that we hop, skip, and jump right into a sale, but it's been a decade, maybe even more, of my entire 32 years of life dedicated to consistency and perseverance and persistence, and even until the end in the last 6 years finding health. So I think even Aaron touched on it, like, and Peter touched on it as well, like our audiences in Web 2, they're not really translating into this space because they're terrified. They are literally terrified. They have no idea what is going on, because we're colliding tech literacy and financial literacy all in one. This is huge, right? And people have been able to sign into their Instagrams and their Facebooks and their social without having to know the back end. So now we're understanding kind of the back end, and it's a lot for some people to kind of grasp. And they're given a ton of different media, with all these different, very scary things that some hold weight, but also they just don't understand how it works. So it just takes a little bit of patience and time. Like I've said at the beginning of this conversation, it's all about slowing down to the speed of life. We really have to make sure that we're studying the space, studying what each platform presents, studying what each artist does, and then also studying ourselves. Who are we? Who do we want to become and go to be? I mean, this space is all about starting from the end, almost working backwards, right? We talk about utility quite often, and that's it, thinking about what's your mission, what's your purpose.
Yeah, and how do you engage with the medium like meaningfully, like, and not just seem expedient minting stuff? Which anyway seems silly to me.
I can't hear you, bro. Has he been rugged? I couldn't hear him.
Yeah, I had the same problem as you.
Yeah, same.
Can you guys hear me now? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, sorry. And I was just also saying, like, making work that relates to the medium, right? Like, that isn't just about like digging through the archive and minting stuff. I don't know. To me, that seems quite expedient. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, there are no set rules, but what Elise Swipes really, I mean, you just nailed it. I think is put down your JPEGs, and if you're getting into the space, almost forget about your images and tell us who you are. Tell us who you are. Get on spaces and talk about your story. If I think of my brother Drift, the reason he's become such an extraordinary success, deservedly, is yes, he takes extraordinary images, but his story is, I believe, why he's building the community that he's building. And I know not everyone has the same story as Drift, but we all have something to say, above and beyond how well we can make an image. And I think that this is what makes this space so dynamic. Is just take your time, engage with people in the community, collect if you can afford to. I mean, I minted my first of my own works just recently, which means that for the last 18 months or so, I've just been engaging in the community, literally collecting, engaging, getting to know folks, learning from them, watching what's going on, looking for pitfalls, understanding, for better or worse, how where this space is going. So it's a listening exercise, and then it's also an exercise of bravery to tell your story and show your vulnerability. We've all been through the mill. COVID has happened, and it's the first time since the Second World War that all of us have been through some kind of collective trauma. And with what's happening in Ukraine, that's again affecting so many people. And I think the Instagram age of perceived fucking perfection it's just gone. if you can't come into this space and you just try and, I don't know, do what Instagram forced so many people to do. Even if you are a success, I think you're damaging what Web3 could be. So I would say listen, tell your story, and wear your vulnerability with pride. And I believe you will find your tribe.
That is fantastic advice. Thank you.
Could we dive deeper on that with everyone? Because I feel like something that I witness as a non-photographer is that there's a primacy, a foregrounding of narrative of the photographer and the interconnections of the social network of the photographers in a way that I feel like if it existed before was much less pronounced. So this aspect of learning how to tell your own story about your own work and how to connect with other people's stories, is that something that you're all perceiving about Web3, or am I misguided in that observation?
I think you're pretty right in that observation. I truly do. I mean, potentially, depending on who you ask. I mean, some people just want to flip. Some people just want to, be a part of the buy. But then there's also people who really want this to be sustainable. This whole space and this community, this entire new generation to be sustainable, and that means we have to reinvest back into people who are doing the work, who are doing the cyclical process to make sure that this is sustained. So I mean, I love studying stories. I love seeing who's behind the work, because then we know, it's authentic. We know that, we're giving to somebody who's gonna push the medium forward. I think the story genuinely matters, especially in this time and space where we've given a lot of space to people who, I mean, we've seen, when we talk about cancel culture so much, and I personally do not believe in cancel culture. I believe in responsibility culture, accountability culture, right? But, when we give space to people who we don't necessarily study or definitely know, I suppose, we give space to people who can allow certain things to happen. So we really have to understand story in order to push spaces forward in a good way. And I don't want to say positive, because I don't think that's the word I want to use, but I think it's just a more beneficial way.
Preach, preach, preach. Don't get me going, sister. We've definitely been in our own DMs discussing this matter. And I would say to everyone that's listening, whether you're established or just getting into this space, we have to be careful who our kings and queens are in this space. I use this term duty of care. I don't speak in Web3 language. So if I go into a spaces and someone says GM, I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I'm a 44-year-old suburban house husband. That is not how I speak. And I'm not going to bend myself to be who I'm not. That's actually the opposite of what Web3 is supposed to be. And that also goes into the collector base. Many of the people that hold the bags, their idea of a good picture is probably what they liked on Instagram and Web2, right? And what that means is that there can be situations where, image makers or images that are concerning, that are selling for unbelievable amounts of money. And as Elise said, it's not about cancel, it's about responsibility and the duty of care for the images. Because, although we are early, habits can harden and form. And before we know it, things like, I don't know, the hypersexualization of images that make many of the women in this space incredibly uncomfortable can become things that are flooding their timelines. And then they're DMing me to say, look, Miss Anne, you're not afraid to call shit out. So call it out. And I do. But these are the habits that are coming from Web 2 to Web 3. The other thing that's happening is that people get scared of calling out the platforms that have become gatekeepers. So, imagine you see something on a platform that makes you uncomfortable, but you're scared to call it out because your images are selling for 5, 10, 20, 30 ETH on that platform. And, this is the sort of stuff I saw in Web 2. So I'm not trying to be the Grinch of it all, but I would say at this early stage, if we are going to all make it, we need to have a real sense of community that thinks of the mistakes we've made in Web 2 and looks out for those mistakes creeping into the builders and the influencers and the platforms that we rely so much upon in this space.
Peter, I think you have your hand up.
No, Misan answered the question I was about to ask. Thanks.
I think
Just sorry, Mikkel.
No, go.
No, and just adding to that as well, it is really, really exciting, and I'm sure we'll get onto the platforms like Sloika and what Obscura did and what everyone's trying to do in photography. But it is really, really interesting who is buying a big majority of the photography. I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in what I'm seeing in the micro side of it. So I support a lot of photographers from India and Nigeria and Turkey. And do you know what happens when they sell a photo for like, I don't know, 0.1? They spend 80% of that on photographers that they met in spaces that they appreciate their work. And that's what's giving me hope. I'm seeing the next generation of collectors. Now they're starting small because that's all they have, but their sense of community and building other image makers up is something that I've never seen in my life. And I think that's what's going to make this space in a pretty short period of time extraordinary. Because they're not just taking their Ethereum or Tezos or Solana or Cardano out, and many of them need the money, but they're still reinvesting it because they know how important it is to spread that liquidity around. And that, to me, is what's going to make this space very, very special.
Justin, I'd love your thoughts maybe on this, as being like founder of Quantum and essentially building a platform for photographers specifically. I think would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this topic specifically.
Sure. Is there a specific question that you'd like me to talk about this?
But I think Mizan mentioned around how platforms have a responsibility on obviously showing and showcasing, photography and photographers and art that is akin to the Web3 mindset and what the values that we're trying to portray. So I'd love to hear maybe your thoughts on this and how you're thinking about this in Quantum specifically.
Sure. Happy to talk about Quantum. So, Quantum was born out of twin flames, and it was a opportunity to transcend myself and also, a selfish project that could be actually abundant for more than just one person, but for dozens of artists and even collectors alike. So, what we wanted to build with the co-founders, Chris Graves, who's pretty well established in the fine art world, has his own book publishing organization called KGP Projects. And he's pretty much leading the entire curation with Rula and another curator who's part of that committee for the photography section. And we're also building out a digital art section. So we're actually expanding far out past photography, which was our roots, just to encourage more artists and collectors to get involved. And because photography is a limiting thing when you're building a platform, but it is our heart and it is our roots. And I think we started strong by working with people who we're onboarding into the space that have established themselves in the art world and are trying to figure out how to, connect with the collectors and the community. And we're pretty much a bridge. So Chris curated the entire season, and 60% of our artists are women, 40% are BIPOC artists. So we were really, challenging that whole idea of what we saw last year with only 5% of women being sales of the entire year. And we want to champion, for those artists because we think that's extremely wrong. And we want to correct that. And the only way to correct that is to build something that can, do that stuff. And I think we're doing that. And, we're doing our best to onboard collectors and educate them to fall in love with photography. Because I think the other most important thing when you're looking into NFTs, yes, the art is a beautiful thing. And we're trying to show world-class artists with really established collections that are cohesive and make sense and tell a story. But I think ultimately when you're working in a financial sector that people, trade their cryptocurrency with and use NFTs as assets, we got to remember there's a financial side to this. And to really get people engaged with photography is to create a liquidity market so people have confidence to collect in photography. Yes, there are collectors who buy for love, but I would say the majority of people who are in NFTs are trying to, profit. So, that's just part of the ecosystem we're in, and we have to have a stance in the ground to fill that market. And I think by creating a secondary liquid market, which is what we're doing with Quantum, at the end of the day, benefits all photographers because it makes people want to buy photography and trust that this too can be profitable. And hopefully they fall in love with what they're buying, and which is the most important part to us. But we also recognize the responsibility in creating liquidity so people care and want to collect people. What do you guys think? Because I like to talk about that a lot. And if I'm wrong, I'd love to hear why. I'm just so curious if this is the right way to think when building, and what is the accountability and what is the responsibility of platforms like ours. And
I mean, Justin, you, you, I honestly wish you were running some of the marketplaces, because I think when you're an artist that is a builder, there is a different duty of care, quite frankly, and you have a very different view on what photography or art is, and you're very right. The value proposition has to have a liquid secondary market, and that is possibly more important than even the quality of the images, because if that if the men and women that are coming in here to flip PFPs, for them to even consider photography, they will need to see that there are photographs being traded at higher prices than what they're being bought. So I really hats off to you for building the first real, purely focused secondary market for photography. Obviously, the marketplaces have secondary markets, but not just focus on photography.
thank you. Yeah, and I wish we were able to work with you, and still in the future, I hope we can.
You
I know,
you know we will, Justin. Come on now.
I know you have
Come
a
on
certain
now.
way of releasing things, so
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm gonna just slowly beg the crypto bros to recognize my sort of work, and once that picks up, I will. If you guys fit me in, I will jump right on board.
yeah, I think it's important to have physical spaces, just like everything Vellum's doing and what Quantum's trying to do, and Bright Moments. I feel like all these IRL spaces will play a key factor into actually strengthening how NFTs are perceived in the greater scheme. of things for the masses, as well as us building stronger bonds just by seeing each other in person and spending time off of Twitter Spaces and actually hanging out, talking, being with the work, and being human, having human connections. I think ultimately that will be what revolutionizes us to be more forward with NFTs in the long run.
One question that we've sort of touched on, but not gone sort of fully into, and I'd sort of throw it to Damiansky and Aaron first, is what is the sort of evolution of photography when we think about new modes of photography in digital contexts, be that, you know, a PGP or be that photography sort of quote in the metaverse. What are some of the hallmarks of photography in an exclusively digital context? Because we have a lot of frameworks for understanding what it is in a physical context.
Yeah, Jesse, with the evolution of my photography, what I've been thinking about a lot, and 4 years ago I didn't necessarily think about it as photography, but I've been doing a lot of photogrammetry for the past 4 years, starting with some Nat Geo projects, but have continued through this whole time. So I'm taking objects and artifacts and making hundreds, and then sometimes in excess of 10,000 photographs of each object that then turns into a dimensionalized model. And for me, that is the extension of my photography, and I consider those photographs. And a lot of some of the first projects I'll be bringing into this space will be those photogrammetry objects themselves.
There's so many different ways you can do it. There are, there really are no rules. So, some examples I can think of. Well, first of all, at the beginning of this, I remember hearing Justin when he just started Twin Flames on Clubhouse, and I remember people laughing, photographers, they were laughing at us. And they were saying, no one's going to give a shit about your pictures unless you animate them, unless you do something with them. And I remember getting one of my pictures rendered, and I just couldn't, it didn't feel right to me. But that's a personal choice. But then my first ever NFT was a collaboration with one of the, in my opinion, one of the great artists in this space, a British artist called Defaced. And I was such a fan of his work, and I was like, how can I collaborate with this person that does digital art? I'm a photographer. What am I going to do? And we had a discussion, and he one of his characters, he has a puppet, and we ended up creating an experience with my lens and his puppet. And then on Tezos, particularly, some of the AI enabled renderings of images are absolutely extraordinary. But one thing I wanted to say to those that are listening, please don't bend your work to become something that you think collectors want in this space. Because I'm seeing a lot of photographers come and ask, should I do this? Not because they want to. If you want to do it as part of your artistic journey, that's absolutely fine. But for God's sake, don't change what you do because you think this community wants it, or you end up just in an absolute mess. And the other thing is roadmaps and utility. Again, if you want to have some sort of roadmap, that is up to you. But certainly, I just don't want to feel that people are forced to do a lot of these buzzwords that they hear, because you could end up not knowing who you are and losing your voice as an image maker. One of the things that I'm thinking of of doing, and it may be in 5 years' time or 5 months' time, is with one of my later collections. This is my, a utility that I want to do is, recording my voice, speaking about the story of the image, and then I will then have that on vinyl. And what I want is the collector, when they have the time, to look at their image, whether it's on their phone or on their internet-enabled digital frame, to put on something that is so analog, like vinyl, and listen to the artist tell an intimate observation of how that image was made. Now, that's something that I just want to do because I think it'll be fun. And that's the utility from an artist's point of view. If you do utility, make sure it's part of your artistic process, not something that you've heard some person say on Twitter Spaces. Thank you.
I think this is a very important point. What is coming up there? Because when we think about the beginning of the 20th century, so many things were changing at that time, and there was such an evolution in art and in photography, and I have the feeling that something like this is around at the moment as well, and therefore I think it's so completely exciting to look through all these NFT platforms and to find out some great things that you find there, and some very interesting and very exciting new artworks.
Metaverse only portraiture or landscape photography. So I can't say who, but I am in talks with one of the early OG 3D artists, and he's able to create universes, and he wants me to enter that universe with him. And he's like, as far as I'm concerned, a photographer is the compositional ability of somebody. So I don't need you to have your camera. I need you to take compositions within the digital worlds that I'm creating. And I was like, wow, that is insane. And he's explained to me how we could do that. And in real time, as he's generating scenery and characters and places with the technology he has, I will be able to decide, what I want to freeze, what moments within the worlds that he's creating. And I think that's going to be a really interesting new world of metaverse first image makers. That's definitely coming and coming soon.
Well, that's actually been going for a while. That's actually what this current assignment is for National Geographic, is all in-world photography, because many of those worlds have got in-world cameras that can function in all the same ways that our regular cameras can. It's a pretty incredible way to make images so far.
Have you sold any of those, or is that something that you're still working on?
No, some of them have been released by Nat Geo, but the larger package starts coming out at the end of March. It's still in process.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to see it, because if that kicks off, which I hope it will, I just think it's a whole new, that's just, could be huge.
Aaron, please elaborate. Sorry.
Well, I've had avatars made for as many worlds as I can, and I'm going into those worlds and carrying cameras that are part of those worlds. So in some worlds, I have a tablet, something that looks like a tablet that I hold in my hand, that I can choose wide angle, telephoto, shallow depth of field, all of the things that I would normally choose. In other worlds, I can't change the depth of field, but I still have the tablet. And in other worlds, still, I have to make screenshots. And so in those worlds, I'm carrying something that's kind of like a dummy camera, but it still holds all of the same ideas as when I'm on a regular assignment. I still have to think about negative space and what makes sense for the composition. And it uses all the same creativity that I would use on a live assignment. In my first leg of the assignment, I was doing underwater photography and made 1,500 photos over the course of 3 days. Some of the worlds, the cameras function incredibly fast. In some of the worlds, you have to have a gaming PC because it almost breaks the computer. So it'll be interesting. Yeah.
Oh, did we get rugged?
No, I think I can still hear you. Can you?
Yep, I can hear. All right.
Everybody just went silent.
Okay, I do have a question for the sort of like traditional photographers. Where, by the way, is Justin? I think, oh, we lost him, because that would also be a question for Justin. So when you do NFTs, and I guess most of you photographers have physical work, especially yeah, Peter, for example. Do you have that in mind, that some photos might already exist in print, and I mean, or are the NFTs a separate body of work or a separate entity? So how do you actually do that, combine like Justin I think only sells the full 100 twin flames project. I think I mean I'd be highly interested
Hi.
in hearing your thoughts about that topic.
Hi, I'm back. I kept getting my connection here. Can you restate the last part of that?
Of my question, yeah, I mean, your twin flames project, I think you only sell, people can buy separate, each photo separate as NFTs, but I think you only sell the full body of work as print. Is that right? I mean, that's my question to the group.
Right.
How do you treat print and NFTs?
Well, it's funny because even when I was starting before NFTs, everything I was doing was basically trying to be a one-on-one. And I've always had that mentality of how to bring scarcity back to photography so it's not reproducible and it can be, valued like a Basquiat painting. So in my eyes, it was how to create a sacred object out of a photograph, having only there be one, even though you can reproduce it. And that's what I did with Twin Flames in 2018 when I printed them in the color darkroom. And I always had the vision to exhibit it as a one big collection of 101C prints, to end up in the MoMA or CO Berlin or somewhere in the world that can appreciate fine art, photography, portraiture like you would see in these museums, and really making it special that because there can only be one. And so by NFTs, when that came along, it allowed me to remove this attachment of not being able to sell this piece and allowing myself to sell the individual images to collectors, to NFT collectors. So now there's this twin, the physical twin that's meant for the institution, the physical, and the digital twin that's meant to be for the people. So in a way, this concept of twins lends itself so well to the idea of duality and materiality between the physical and digital world. And because they're twins, in a way where it's centralized and decentralized. I hope I wasn't rugged when I was talking.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Anyone else? I mean, Daniel, for example, I mean, your animal photos, the jumping cats, the alpacas in New York. I mean, we all know them from Instagram and from, I don't know, various websites, and they are actually calendars. Yeah, so do you also have the prints in mind when you now do NFTs?
Yeah, I think it's super exciting for me also to do one-of-one in NFTs because before I was selling my images mostly in the edition of 9 because 9 is my lucky number, and so I never made edition of 1 because I was thinking it makes no sense for photography, and so this became the most interesting part of for me for doing NFTs and doing them one-on-one. And yeah, my calendar work the images, the animal work I did, they came out as a calendar, and so there it was an open edition of 5,000. But with NFTs, I'm happy that it's one of one, and yeah, I'm kind of confused if I should do prints and make them in additional to NFT, if it's right or if it's wrong, because somehow I feel like I give my word to someone if I sell an edition of one, and I'm not sure if it's the correct way to also sell them in prints because people spending a lot of money in NFTs, and so I really want to have them the edition of one. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'm confused by this, to be honest.
Justin, what is the edition of your physical prints?
Sorry, Peter, I couldn't hear you. I think your connection was broken.
Sorry, what is the edition of your physical prints of the twin flames?
Did someone understood it? It's great for me.
What is the edition of your twin flames in physical prints?
That's a question for Justin. I think what's the so the twin flames? It's 100 prints. It's a series of 100.
Maybe I'd like to hear the sort of inverse perspective if anybody has it, or maybe everybody is like one of one maxi. But does anybody see a wisdom or a logic in high edition uh, photography the way that, in the Tezos ecosystem, artists are finding new collectors by having higher edition counts at more accessible price points?
I did this already in my gallery. I started, I think, in 2014 or something like that. 2013. I did high editions of 1,000, and when we started, it was as an experiment from one of my artists, Rudolf Bonvi, and we were trying to find out if the people not only want to have the images in their virtual space in the computer, in Facebook or Tumblr, or if they would like to have it as well in real on their wall. And therefore we made this edition of 1,000, and that was a huge success. And then we continued to do this with this edition of 1,000, and still we have some very interesting work in small format for 99 euros. In an edition of 1,000, for example, Ulrike Rosenbach and Peter as well, we did it. And it's great because then you find new people, and it's often that these prints then gifts for Christmas or for friends, and you start to build up as well a new group around the photographers. And doesn't mean that then you can't sell the less editioned work anymore. That is much more expensive. It's a little bit like on Tezos blockchain.
I think the market, it's tough because I think, for me, I especially my civil rights work, there are many people that I think would love to collect some of those works, but the market may make it beyond their reach. So one thing I've been thinking hard about is, initially I wanted to do quite similar to Justin, actually, 100 one of ones, but what I've decided is to do 99 one of ones and then finish with an edition. I haven't decided how big that edition will be, possibly 100, just to make sure that other people in the community can have access to my works. I don't know if there's a set way of doing it, but that's sort of where I'm heading from my own, how I'm shaping my own collection. Yeah, that's a great idea as well.
All right. Nicole, were you about to say something?
Nope, not really.
All right. I have one more question, and then I'd love to kind of open up to the room unless Annika or Nicole do. But kind of building off this last question and some DMs in the background, how are you thinking about the introduction of market making and market mechanics at a sort of broad scale with NFTs in a way that perhaps photographers didn't necessarily consider in the pre NFT moment, like having to contend with whether you want to think about market or not, the way something will operate in a market and engineering scarcity. What do you think the sort of, I don't know, conceptual impact on photography as a practice will be or could be?
Testing. Definitely testing. Listen, you're going to get people who, just because their work is extraordinary, don't have to do any of that. They'll be the lucky ones. I think most of us are going to have to study how things work. Currently, the main way to be seen is by getting on Twitter, and engaging, sharing your work, other people's work, and getting on Twitter Spaces. If you're lucky, one of the big marketplaces may invite you and feature you, but that again is there is no exact science in that. So there are many photographers that I speak to that get very dejected because they work so hard to make the images, and then they get into this space, and now they have to kind of do the splits while speaking Latin, in order to be noticed by a marketplace. And one of my big frustrations is that we mustn't feel that we have arrived once a marketplace recognizes us. Otherwise, honestly, we're just doing the same stuff as Web2. What people like Richard have built with Manifold allows us to have our own collections on our own smart contracts, and then we can that smart contract can talk to multiple marketplaces. That's absolutely fine. But I foresee a future where we should be in charge of our own fate and building our own community, as we are doing now. There are people that are listening to everyone that's speaking today that may not have heard of them, and they're going to follow them and look at their work and hopefully support them. That's where I hope this place will go. The idea that like when people get on Super Rare and they're like, oh my god, I'm on Super Rare, and that I get PTSD. I genuinely do, because I'm like, this is the same shit that I saw before. And yes, Super Rare can give you access to some of their buyers, but do not, that is not going to, that shouldn't be your focus. Your focus is telling your story and having the community become your tribe. And that's when we will do something that's different from the world that we are all really running away from. So it's really, I mean, yes, the marketplaces are important, but do not ever feel you're beholden to them, because this technology actually can emancipate you from all of that.
Thank you, Misan. I brought Margaret up to also speak with her about that. I mean, Margaret, we know each other because you studied photography at Hartford Art School, and I've been there once to speak with you guys about, I think it was the metaverse. And you've studied photography, and now you started, selling your NFTs on Foundation. How's that for you? And maybe do you have a question for the photographers on stage?
Hi, Annika. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really fascinating to listen to. Misan, I really resonated with a lot of what you had to say specifically. Um, my experience so far has very much been that you really do have to self-promote in a way that most artists are not taught how to. And that it certainly favors people who maybe grew up in their years more online and a part of online communities such as, LiveJournal, Reddit, um, at least in this Twitter space. But I do worry. I heard you say when you were speaking with Justin, where you said, I have to convince the art bros to support my work first, and that's an alarming thing to hear, and kind of makes me worry. Well, how do we know we're not just repeating the same steps of Web 2 in Web 3, where the people that are holding the keys are the people who have the crypto or have been here from the beginning, and sort of like where really is that democratic platform? I haven't been in this space very long, but I am acutely aware of those pitfalls. I think, having seen them coming from a more traditional fine art photography background. So, if anybody has thoughts on that, I would love to hear.
Elise, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in because I've noticed the same thing, and Margaret, I've spoke on this quite a bit in many spaces, saying, we've had to play the game. We got to play the game in order to get into the game. And it's like, I don't want to even have to say that, like, but unfortunately what the issue is systemically the people who do have the opportunity to be more inclusive, to have more diversity. These people really didn't have an opportunity to be a part of the system that has somewhat enabled this to become something. So when we talk about the crypto bros, when we talk about a lot of these people who will give us the advantage of having the funding, to collect or to fund other artists, it's like that's a reality because of the system that we're already in. People keep talking about, there's no such thing as race. There's no such thing as all this kind of whatever. But that is, all of that stuff still affects us in our day to day and our real life. And that affects the way that we come into this space. And so, for me personally, I came into this space as an artist, as a creator, and I sold. And I didn't really have to like beg for people to appreciate me because I had already been in a comfortable space of like representing myself. But I see other people having to beg other people to understand them. And that to me is such a difficulty because unfortunately that's the place that a lot of people are in order to gain this sustainable funding at first. Like, so for me, I've gotten 40 ETH or so of my super rare sales, and after that I was like, I'm not playing this BS game anymore with people. I'm not going to be out here begging people to understand me when they don't understand me on purpose. So it was just like a shift for me, thinking about like, how do I grow my assets separate from having to beg other people to understand me, and making that money run long and making smart choices and not having to be a part of that, and understanding and playing that trial and error in this community has really, I think, allowed me to consider what those options look like.
Every word. Every word that Elise just said. I I don't know what the percentage is of people that hold most of the liquidity in this space, but I'm quite sure they're mainly men, and they're mainly men that have probably a quite similar worldview. And if any of you follow me, I'm forever complaining about everyone that has a voice that isn't celebrated, whether it's women, people that are neurodiverse like me, and of course, people of color. And, a great example is a Turkish artist called Dilek Umar. And Dilek is, I describe her as a generational talent. I look at her pictures and I want to flush my camera down the toilet. But she is a woman from Turkey who English is not her first language. And I have DM'd, like, I don't just share, I DM the biggest collectors. And, they don't, and I'm not saying you must buy her work, but at least share it, And I think the issue that we're having here is a lot of the most influential voices. When I go on their timelines, I scroll and I scroll and I scroll and I scroll, and I only usually ever see a single story. And what we must, Margaret, what you must look to is to find the people like Elise, like Justin, like so many people on this stage that have that thing called empathy that is laced with purpose, and hopefully some liquidity to help actually change the narrative. And we do exist. Unfortunately, most of us don't have the biggest bags, but that will change. And I believe institutions are going to come and look for a certain new breed of collector that they want to be associated with to collect work as well. So I just do not feel dejected. And there are communities within communities that are doing the work. If I think of my country, Nigeria, and the women and men and everything in between that are many of them are risking their own lives just to try and hold the camera or the tablet or the paintbrush, and many of them don't even have the confidence to raise their hand or request to speak, and many of them, when they do, the host will listen to them and hear their heavy accent and look at the fact that their work isn't necessarily got a crazy floor price and just move them on. And I'm the troublesome uncle that just tries to let them know that their voice actually is the very voice that this technology is built for. And I am not alone. But unfortunately, some of the earliest people that have been shaping the narrative have absolutely no interest. And this isn't a criticism. I think everyone's different, but the narrative by some of the most powerful voices, and I'm being very honest, I do not see them celebrating the diversity of stories, whether it is culturally or race or sexuality or gender fluidity. I do not see any of those communities be celebrated and shared in the way that they must be if we are all going to make it.
Thanks both for those answers. I guess I also had one more question. Um, I resonate. I can't remember who said this, but it really hit home with me, which was don't just pull JPEGs from your archives. Create something for the space, which is something that I, even before, launching my first Genesis, was thinking about. And I guess in that sense, do you feel like you kind of are allowing yourself to connect with a different type of audience then? And then as an artist, do your kind of collector bases or the people that resonate with your work, do they diverge? And is that okay? And how do you kind of reconcile that? I think, Daniel, you were kind of maybe not so sure about that, or um, Peter, you were maybe wondering the same thing.
Don't bend yourself to anything in this space that doesn't feel like it's what you want to do. your archive, Margaret, I haven't seen it, but you may have taken something or many things years ago that this community is desperate to see. You know, the photographs that I'm seeing coming out of India and Turkey were taken. Many of them were taken years ago. Some of the the horse photography I'm seeing in places that have been destroyed now could never be taken again. Those are in archives. So yes, of course you can do something that speaks truth to this dynamic opportunity of being a creative in Web3, but in the medium of photography has to be respected in this space. And again, it's also our duty of care to make sure that archives have value. Because again, in Web2, archives were, Getty was just destroying all of that, frankly speaking. So just stay true to who you believe you are as an image maker. And when we hear your story more and more, Margaret, I think people will support you either way.
So I think we're coming up to over 90 minutes, and we might wrap it up. But thank you to everyone, to all of the speakers, for this really, really incredible conversation. We do these conversations every week, every Tuesday, with Jessie and Annika. The next one will actually be on the topic of collecting. So I guess we'll talk about some of the topics that Mizan and others have mentioned this week as well. But yeah, thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
It was great. Thank you.